Welcome to Charter Communications Local Edition, coming to you from the state capitol in Helena in preparation for the 2015 legislative session. Our guest for this segment is a longtime legislator, Senator Fred Thomas from Stevensville, Senate District 45. Fred, how many sessions all told will this be?
I think this will be my 10th session.
Oh my goodness.
And plus special sessions, and there's nothing special about a special session.
Well,
so
except that they're fairly not,
they're not regular anyway.
Well, how did you this isn't your full-time occupation,
No.
like it isn't for anybody. What is your livelihood?
Well, my livelihood economically is I'm a bond agent and insurance agent for contractors. I work at Payne West Insurance in the Bitterroot Valley.
And been there forever.
Yeah,
it's a family business. Even,
born and raised there, and we used to be a family-owned business, but I associated it with Western States and now Payne West Insurance. We have a great operation.
Yes.
It's excellent stuff.
Yeah. Well, how'd you get into politics?
Well, my grandfather was
many years ago.
Yeah, my first was elected to House in '84, but my grandfather was in the House in the early '50s, and my dad in the early '70s, and then I in the mid '80s.
A legacy.
So yeah, sort of, maybe, whatever.
You still got to run for it, though.
Yeah, that's right. The voters have always been comfortable with me down there, majority anyway, and it's been a pleasure to represent the Bitterroot Valley the numerous times that I have.
Well, speaking of the majority, you're in the majority this time.
Yes.
So you more or less get to control the agenda. Let's talk about, you just moments ago, leadership elections happened. That's the roar of the crowd behind us.
Yes.
Are you pleased with how that turned out? Are we going to have strong leadership here?
Yep, I think in the Senate Republican caucus, House Republican caucus, I'm very certain we'll have very good leadership. We elected the first woman to be the president of the state Senate, Debbie Barrett from Dillon. So we're excited about that.
Is that the first woman in history?
That's my understanding.
Oh.
And so that's a neat deal.
That's overdue then.
Yeah, I think it's overdue. And I think that we have, in the Senate Republicans, we have a very strong group of dynamic women leaders in our caucus, and that are second to none in being senators and leaders in the state. So we're proud of that.
What do you see as the major issues that are going to take place? Give me two off the top of your head.
Well, it always comes down to budget.
Okay.
And of course,
there's a surplus a little bit.
Yeah, there's surplus.
Some people think there is.
We're in decent shape, that's for sure, economically, statewide. Taxes, we've got, there'll always be tax issues as well. I know that one of our major efforts are going to be to reform the income tax to make it simplified significantly, and to make our income tax just that much better in Montana, so people can do it easily and go for it.
Yeah.
But the budget will come back to always be the big issue. With the surplus, we're doing pretty well, but the governor's proposing several things to spend extra money on. Those things all have big ticket items, and it's going to be hard to fit them all together, even if you, unless you have some magic and some mirrors to balance the budget. And usually we just use dollars and cents.
So speaking of that, how do you think that ends up? I think these people can come ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
How do you think that ends up?
Well, I think it's going to be a set of things that we need to work with the governor's office.
The governor being a Democrat.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
the majorities in both houses being Republican.
Yeah. So we're going to have to sit down and talk these things through. Republican majorities in the legislature are typically not interested in kind of growing government by any means at all. And so the governor's got some things there that he's proposed that I think a lot of us are just going to say, well, we're not too sure about adding on. We've got enough government, especially with the federal level doing what they're doing. We're not interested in more government. We're interested in better government, more efficient government, and less regulation. And so those battles are going to go on between the Republicans in the legislature and a very liberal Democrat governor. But we'll make it all work. We'll bring it together.
Tell me, so being specific, you got a $350 to maybe $450 million surplus. How much of that would you give back in tax diminutions or reforms, or And how much of it would you save?
Well, you know, the number that we've been working with is actually like $364 or $65 million.
When you say the acknowledged budget.
The revenue committee, that's the number that we think we were at a month ago. And now we have to go forward with, see where we're at now as we come along. I think the revenue may be a hair softer than we anticipated. I've also heard that the governor's office think it may be higher. You know, we'll go through that all. The governor floats that up and says, well, revenue is higher, then he can afford these things that he wants to do. If the revenue doesn't come in, then it eats into this big, massive ending fund balance that's there. So we need to kind of go through that and deal with it in a real way, and deal with it on what's real dollars and not something that's just kind of floated up there to make it all fit together. Because the trouble with it is when you add things that fit together now because you can maybe afford them, down the road they keep growing exponentially, and then there's more demands, and you have less money to take care of our local schools and maybe the university students. And so you got to be very careful of how big we grow this budget. Smaller, leaner government's always the way to go, in my opinion.
Last session there was a bill, 218, that was to address emerging infrastructure needs in eastern Montana.
Yeah.
Now I know you're in the Bitterroot, but you know, everybody votes, and everybody seems to acknowledge the need. But there's a debate whether that should be paid for with cash or borrowed money, and the argument is that the cash is making so much money in current investments that it makes more sense to use borrowed money because we have such a great credit rating that the borrowed money only costs 1.5 points, and meanwhile you don't want to spend money that's making 17%, something like that. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, number one, we want to try and address those issues, the needs that are out there, number one. In eastern Montana and across the state, we've got needs for infrastructure.
Well, they're
water
pouring
and
in
sewer.
Lots of, part of the budget surplus is coming from there.
As
correct?
well, no doubt, but you know, definitely, and we wanted to do that. The governor should have signed that bill last time. The money was there in the surplus, the ending fund balance. You don't need a $300 million ending fund balance. I mean, we've done this before with $20 million. So it's like we have this big, gigantic ending fund balance for I'm not sure why. So the money's in the bank to pay for that. The governor had this artificial rule that he wanted this $300 million ending fund balance. We were kind of told in hindsight after the legislative session was over. So, okay, that's his position. We need this gigantic ending fund balance, even though the money's in the bank to do this sort of thing. So wasn't a good move then, and so going forward though, we need to figure that out so that we can make sure that we deal with that, and it's always better to use that money right now for that use, or let's send it back to the taxpayers and let them just keep the money. Property tax, income tax, what have you, the taxpayer is the best place for it. It's their money to start with, not ours. So either use it now for infrastructure or let's send it back to the taxpayers.
Fred, we're going to have to wrap up. Any parting words, wishes and hopes for the session as it unfolds a month from now?
Well, I think that
the
only thing I'd say, thank you for having me, and that's and in addition to that, I think we've started out on a good page and a better good step in the Senate Republican caucus. There's a lot of tough work to be done now, and I think we've started on the right foot. Looking forward to that continuing.
Well, I wish you best of luck, and thanks for coming on the program. Thanks for serving all these years. It's quite a sacrifice. People don't understand that it is. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. Support these legislators. Let them know what you think. You will anyway. And thanks for tuning in to Charter Local Edition.